The galaxy shivered under the rule of Empress Zyra, the supreme leader of the Korra Dominion. Her name alone was enough to silence entire star systems. Worlds had fallen to her armies, civilizations crushed beneath her iron grip. Zyra was feared, not because she killed carelessly, but because she always knew exactly when to strike and how. Her mind was sharper than any blade, and her cruelty was precise. On Earth, people whispered stories of her power. Earth had survived the first wave of interstellar war, but it had not forgotten. Humanity had rebuilt, but the shadow of the Korra Dominion still loomed. And now, Zyra herself was coming. Captain Elias Ward stood on the landing platform, his boots clicking softly against the metal floor. He was a human, but not an ordinary one. Once a war hero, now a diplomat, Elias had seen death up close and had survived. His brown eyes were calm yet alert. There was no fear in him, not even now, as the largest Korra ship in history descended. From the sky, blocking the sun, the ship's hull was black and smooth, shaped like a blade ready to strike. It landed with a ground-shaking thud. Massive doors opened, and a single figure stepped out. The crowd of humans watching from a safe distance held their breath. Zyra was taller than most humans, her form elegant, yet terrifying. Her skin had a subtle metallic sheen, and her eyes glowed with a strange golden light. She wore armor that seemed alive, shaped like flowing metal that moved with her every step. The soldiers behind her were even more formidable, their weapons trained on anyone who dared move. Elias took a deep breath. He had studied the Korra for years, and yet nothing could prepare him for the presence of their leader. Her gaze swept over the assembly like a blade, then it stopped on him. "You are Captain Elias Ward?" Zyra's voice was sharp, controlled, and full of authority. It carried over the crowd, yet it seemed meant only for him. "Yes, Empress," Elias said steadily. He bowed slightly, not out of fear, but as a sign of respect for her office. "I am here to discuss terms for your arrival." Zyra's lips curved slightly, almost like a smirk. "Terms," she said slowly, as if tasting the word. "Do humans have terms with those who conquer them?" Elias held her gaze. "We believe in negotiation before destruction. It is more efficient." For a moment, Zyra studied him, tilting her head as though trying to see past his body, past his words, into his mind. Elias felt a chill, though he would not show it. Most beings would have cowered under such a stare. He did not. "You are not afraid," she said finally. "Most are." "I have lived through worse," Elias replied, "and fear does not win wars. Understanding does." Zyra's eyes narrowed. "Understanding is a human weakness." "Perhaps," Elias said, "but it is also a human strength." The silence that followed was heavy. Around them, humans held their breath, watching the moment carefully. Even the Korra soldiers seemed tense, unused to seeing their empress so engaged with a human in such a way. "Interesting," Zyra murmured, then nodded sharply. "You will come aboard my ship. We will speak further." Elias nodded. His mind raced. He knew that stepping onto the Dominion's fist, her flagship, was dangerous. One wrong move, and he could die, or worse, Earth could be punished. But he also knew that avoiding this meeting would make things far worse. The doors opened wider, and the crowd stepped back. Elias followed Zyra inside, feeling the air shift as they entered the ship. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls shimmered as if alive, and the floor beneath his feet hummed with energy. Screens floated in midair, showing star systems and fleets moving in real time. The smell of metal and power filled the air. Zyra led him to a chamber that overlooked the stars. They were far from Earth now, drifting in orbit around the planet. She gestured for him to sit. You have seen war up close, she said quietly, almost conversationally. And yet you smile at the idea of understanding? Elias leaned back. War teaches you many things. Fear is one, respect is another, and sometimes, mercy is the most powerful weapon of all. Zira tilted her head again, studying him with curiosity. No human had ever spoken like this to her. Most bowed, obeyed, or begged for mercy. Yet Elias spoke with quiet confidence, his words measured, his tone calm. He did not try to impress her. He simply stated facts, yet the weight of his presence felt heavy. You are different, she said at last. Do humans always think so boldly? Not always, Elias said. But we survive because we do. We endure because we must. And we fight because we care. Zira did not respond immediately. She stared at him, and for the first time in centuries, the Empress felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. It was not anger, not conquest, not even curiosity exactly. It was something deeper, something she could not name. The silence stretched, filled only by the low hum of the ship. Outside, the stars glimmered, indifferent to the tension inside the chamber. Then Zira spoke, her voice softer this time. You intrigue me, Captain. Perhaps the galaxy has not yet shown me all it has to offer. Elias smiled faintly. And perhaps it has. We are all more than we seem. The Empress's golden eyes flickered, and for the first time, the weight of her throne seemed lighter. She was curious, and that curiosity was dangerous, very dangerous, for both of them. And so, aboard the Dominion's Fist, two beings from opposite worlds met, not as enemies, not yet as allies, but as equals in a galaxy that had never seen such a meeting before. The human and the tyrant would speak, argue, and test each other. And in that dialogue, the first threads of change began to form, threads that would stretch across the stars and alter the destiny of the Korra Dominion forever. Days passed aboard the Dominion's Fist. Captain Elias Ward found himself walking the endless corridors of the massive ship, observing the Korra soldiers and the intricate systems that powered it. The ship was more than a weapon. It was a moving city, alive with energy and precision. Yet despite its technological marvel, there was one presence that made the entire vessel feel alive in a different way. Empress Zira. Zira remained distant from most of her crew, as always. They obeyed her without question, but fear kept them at a distance. Elias, however, noticed something different. The Empress did not just observe him as she did others. She listened, studied, and even questioned him. Her golden eyes often lingered on him when she thought he wasn't looking, and he caught her expression softening at times, though fleetingly. Their first full conversation was not formal. It began in the observation chamber, a vast space filled with the light of distant stars. Elias had asked to see the galaxy from her perspective, and she had granted it, if only to test him. You humans, you value individuality too much, Zira said, her tone calm but edged with curiosity. You fight, argue, and die for what you believe. Your species is stubborn. Elias smiled faintly. Stubbornness is useful. It keeps us alive. It makes us care for each other. Zira studied him silently for a moment. Care? That is a weakness. Or a strength, Elias replied. We survive not because we conquer, but because we work together, even when it is hard. You build empires on fear, but fear alone does not last. The Empress's lips twitched as if fighting a smile. No one had ever spoken to her this way. She had, ruled for centuries, and every word spoken to her had been cautious, full of deference or flattery. Elias spoke with neither. He spoke with honesty. You are different, Zira said finally, her voice almost a whisper. Do all humans think like you? No, Elias admitted. But we have to learn to think for ourselves. And sometimes, the hardest lessons come from those we fear most. Zyra tilted her head, intrigued. She had always relied on her intelligence and fear to maintain order. But this human, he challenged her in ways that made her think, not react. Over the next few days, their conversations continued. They spoke of strategy, of politics, of the countless battles that had shaped the galaxy. Zyra expected him to bend, to fear, to falter. He did none of those things. Instead, he questioned her decisions, pointing out consequences she had never considered. Sometimes she snapped at him, frustrated by his persistence. Other times, she laughed quietly, a sound so rare it startled the crew when it echoed through the corridors. One evening, Elias found Zyra alone in the garden section of the ship, a rare place where plants from various worlds were kept alive. It was her personal sanctuary, a place she visited only when she wanted to think. "You do not often come here," Elias said, stepping quietly beside her. "No," Zyra replied. "It is peaceful, but I am not used to peace." Elias looked at the plants around them, their leaves glowing softly under artificial sunlight. "Perhaps peace is something worth learning." Zyra's eyes softened as she regarded him. "You humans speak so boldly. You do not fear me." "I do not fear what I understand," Elias said simply. "And I try to understand." For the first time, Zyra felt a strange warmth, not physical but emotional. She was the empress of a vast empire, feared across the stars, yet she found herself wanting to share her thoughts with this human. She wanted to hear his ideas, to test his reasoning, to see what he would do next. "You are curious," she said, almost to herself, "and bold, and perhaps foolish." "Perhaps," Elias said with a small shrug. "But sometimes foolishness leads to discovery. And discovery is how we survive." Zyra studied him silently. No one in her life had ever spoken with such calm confidence. Most either cowered or tried to manipulate her. This human, he was neither. He was honest, and yet he was not weak. "You speak of survival," she said, her voice quieter now. "Do you think the galaxy will ever survive if it continues as it is?" Elias looked out at the stars, his expression serious. "Not if everyone rules with fear. But if someone shows them another way, maybe." Zyra's golden eyes flickered as she considered his words. She had ruled with fear her entire life. It had worked. It had brought order. And yet, Elias's words planted a seed in her mind, a question she had never dared ask herself. Could there be another way? Could she be more than a tyrant? The human's presence was dangerous. It challenged her, and yet, strangely, it brought her a sense of calm she had not known in centuries. She did not understand it, and she did not trust it fully, but it was real. Over time, their bond grew. They debated endlessly, sometimes heatedly, sometimes quietly. They shared thoughts of home, of loss, of hope. Elias did not pity her, and Zyra did not manipulate him. They were two leaders from different worlds, learning from each other in ways neither had expected. And then one day, Zyra noticed a change within herself, a flutter of something she could not name whenever Elias was near. She ignored it at first, telling herself it was curiosity or perhaps respect. But it was more, something warmer, deeper, a thought she could not dismiss. Elias, for his part, was careful. He treated her with respect, never assuming anything, yet he felt the connection too. He had seen empires rise and fall, and he knew that even the strongest rulers were still human, still vulnerable in ways few could see. That evening, as the stars stretched endlessly beyond the observation deck, Zyra said softly, Perhaps there is more to you than I thought, human. Perhaps more than I expected. Elias simply nodded, smiling faintly. And perhaps there is more to you than you allow yourself to see. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken thoughts. Outside, the galaxy continued to spin, indifferent to the lives aboard the Dominion's fist. But inside, two beings from opposite worlds had begun to understand each other in ways that would change both of their lives forever. Little did they know, this understanding would soon lead to a discovery that neither of them could have anticipated. A discovery that would shake the foundations of the Korra Dominion and the entire galaxy. Word count: 950. Days passed aboard the Dominion's fist, and the bond between Captain Elias Ward and Empress Zira grew stronger. They spent hours together discussing strategy, politics, and the history of the galaxy. Yet, beneath the surface, their conversations were changing. They were no longer just discussions about survival and power. They were about understanding, about seeing the person beneath the armor. One morning, Elias found Zira in her private quarters, standing by a large viewport that looked out at the swirling stars. Her posture was tense, her golden eyes staring into the distance, yet not seeing the stars at all. "You look troubled," Elias said softly, stepping closer. Zira did not turn immediately. "Troubled? Perhaps," she replied. "Or perhaps I am thinking. For the first time in centuries, I am thinking about something other than conquest." Elias nodded, understanding more than she expected. "And what is it that weighs on you, Empress?" She finally turned to him, her eyes meeting his. There was a vulnerability in her gaze that few had ever seen. "I wonder if peace is truly possible. Can an empire built on fear ever find peace without collapsing?" Elias studied her carefully. "It will not be easy," he said. "But if someone leads with courage and wisdom, if someone shows their people a better way, peace can grow, even in the harshest lands." Zira's expression softened. "You speak as if it is simple." "Nothing worth having is simple," Elias replied. "But it is possible, and sometimes the hardest battles are not fought with weapons. They are fought within ourselves." The Empress remained silent for a moment, her thoughts heavy. Then she spoke, her voice quieter than before. "I have spent centuries ruling with fear because it is the only language the galaxy understands. And yet, I am tired. Tired of the tired of the endless fighting, tired of solitude. I wonder if I could be more than this." Elias stepped closer carefully. "You already are more than this, Empress. You have the strength to change, not just yourself, but the galaxy." Zira looked at him, and for a moment her usual composure faltered. She had ruled with precision and fear, but this human, he did not demand her obedience, nor did he fear her power. He challenged her, yes, but he also believed in her in a way that no one else ever had. In the days that followed, something unusual happened. Zira began spending more time with Elias, not just in discussions about strategy, but walking the corridors, visiting the observation decks, even exploring parts of her ship she had rarely seen in decades. She found herself laughing quietly at his stories, listening intently to his observations about human life, and even sharing memories from her own past, rare glimpses of a life before she became Empress. One evening, while observing a nearby star system, Elias noticed a subtle change in Zira. Her breathing was uneven, her expression distant. "Empress, are you well?" he asked. Zira hesitated, then spoke softly. I feel different, strange, in a way I do not understand." Elias frowned, sensing the significance. "Different how?" "I cannot explain it," she said. "It is as if something has shifted inside me. Something New. Elias reached out gently. Perhaps it is hope. Perhaps it is the first sign of change you have allowed yourself. Zira studied him for a long moment, then looked away, as if afraid to admit the truth even to herself. Days later, she confirmed what she had suspected, what she had feared and longed for in equal measure. I am expecting a child, Zira whispered to Elias one evening, the stars casting soft light over her face. This is impossible, or at least I thought it was. Elias's eyes widened, and then he smiled gently. It is not impossible, he said quietly. It is real, and it is a gift. Zira looked at him, uncertainty and fear in her golden eyes. A gift? You call this a gift? Yes, Elias said firmly. Life is always a gift. It brings hope and it changes everything. This child, it could change the future of the Dominion and of the galaxy. Zira felt a wave of emotions she had never known. Fear, joy, confusion, but beneath it all a deep sense of peace began to stir, a feeling she had not experienced in centuries of ruling with fear and power. I do not know what to do, she admitted. How can I lead an empire and yet carry a life that changes everything? You lead with courage, Elias said softly, and you make choices that are true to yourself. That is how leaders are remembered, not just for the empires they build, but for the lives they protect. Zira's gaze fell on the stars outside the viewport. For centuries, she had ruled through fear and power. She had crushed rebellions, silenced dissent, and maintained control over thousands of worlds. And now, she felt something entirely new. A responsibility not just to her empire, but to a life growing within her. The revelation of her pregnancy changed everything. Elias became a trusted companion in ways she had never imagined. He was not just an advisor, not just a human diplomat, he was a partner, a presence that brought her comfort and clarity in a galaxy that had long been cruel and indifferent. As the days passed, Zira began to reconsider everything she had ever known. Could she truly change? Could she trust this human? Could she lead the Korra Dominion not through fear, but through understanding, guidance, and compassion? Elias did not offer answers. He offered support, wisdom, and a steady hand. And for the first time in centuries, Zira allowed herself to hope. And so, aboard the Dominion's Fist, two beings from opposite worlds stood together, facing a new reality that neither had expected. A child would soon join their lives, and with that life, the foundation of the Korra Dominion itself would be tested. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would the Empress. News of Empress Zira's pregnancy spread quickly through the Dominion's Fist. At first, the revelation was met with shock, then whispers of fear and doubt. Loyal commanders and generals who had followed her without question for decades began to question her judgment. Some saw it as a weakness, others feared the consequences of a half-human heir in a strictly Korra-led empire. Zira felt the tension immediately. Her golden eyes, usually steady and commanding, now held concern. This will not be simple, she admitted to Elias one evening as they walked the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before them, distant and indifferent, but the weight of the galaxy pressed heavily on their shoulders. Elias nodded, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. Nothing worthwhile is ever simple, but you are not alone. I will stand with you whatever happens. Zira turned to him, studying his calm, steady expression. In a galaxy built on fear, Elias's confidence was both unusual and comforting. She had faced rebellion, assassination attempts, and wars that spanned light years. Yet, she found herself feeling vulnerable in ways she had not imagined. The first challenge came quickly. General Korath, her most trusted military advisor, requested a private audience. His tall, armored form filled the chamber, and his gaze was sharp, filled with suspicion. "Empress," he began, his voice firm, "your condition is troubling. The Dominion cannot be led by someone distracted or compromised. Our enemies will see this as weakness." Zira met his gaze without flinching. "I am still the Empress, and my judgment is not compromised." Korath shook his head. "Respectfully, Your Highness, others will not see it that way. There are whispers already. Some may even seek to overthrow you." Elias stepped forward. "They will not succeed," he said, his tone calm but firm. "Zira is still the leader they have always followed. Fear does not make loyalty. Respect does. And the galaxy respects her." Korath's golden eyes narrowed at the human, but he said nothing more. He left, though his doubt lingered like a shadow across the ship. In the following days, the tension escalated. Several factions within the Dominion began to mobilize, quietly testing the loyalty of distant star systems. Zira realized that protecting her unborn child and the future of her empire would require more than strength. She would need strategy, diplomacy, and courage beyond anything she had used before. Elias became an essential part of that strategy. He coordinated with loyal commanders, helped plan defenses, and offered insight into human diplomacy, something entirely foreign to the Korra, who had always relied on domination. His calm reasoning and careful planning inspired trust among those who might have otherwise wavered. One evening, as Zira trained in the ship's combat simulator, Elias approached her. "The rebel fleets are moving faster than we expected," he said. "If we do not act soon, they could strike the capital worlds before we are ready." Zira's hands paused over the controls. "I will not allow bloodshed for the sake of fear. We will defend ourselves, yes, but I will not destroy innocents to maintain power." Elias nodded. "Then we will fight smart, not recklessly. We will protect your people and your child." Zira smiled faintly, feeling a deep sense of trust in him. For centuries, she had relied only on herself. Now she had someone who would fight beside her, not for her crown, but for the future she envisioned. The first real confrontation came in the form of a small strike team attempting to infiltrate her flagship. Elias had anticipated their move and set a trap. Zira watched from the observation deck as the rebels were captured with minimal casualties, their ships disabled without loss of life. "This is how it can be done," Elias said quietly, standing beside her. "We can defend the Dominion without becoming the monsters the galaxy fears." Zira nodded, the weight of her responsibilities pressing on her, but tempered by the hope that she could indeed lead differently. Yet she knew the greater challenges were still ahead. Rumors were spreading among the generals and distant systems. Some saw her pregnancy as a sign that she was vulnerable, too human, too weak to command. Others whispered that Elias's influence was dangerous, that a human was guiding the Empress of the Dominion. Zira confronted these whispers with determination. In a private address to her closest advisors, she declared, "This child is the future of the Korra Dominion. Not through fear, not through bloodshed, but through hope. Those who wish to see us weakened will find only their own downfall." The B. Room was silent. Some were impressed, others wary. But all understood one thing: the Empress was resolute. Days later, the rebel fleets launched a full assault on the outer territories. Zira and Elias coordinated the defense together. The battles were tense, but unlike previous wars, Zira did not command with fear. She guided with strategy, precision, and courage. Elias's human tactics complemented her Korra experience perfectly. Together, they managed to repel the attackers, saving countless lives and securing key systems. After the battle, Zira returned to her private quarters, exhausted but unbroken. Elias followed, carrying a small pack of supplies for her. She looked at him, gratitude in her eyes. "You have changed the way I see leadership," she admitted softly. "I always believed power meant fear, But now, perhaps there is another way. Elias smiled gently. You have always been powerful. You just needed to see that strength can be more than conquest. It can protect, inspire, and guide. Zira looked at the stars beyond her viewport, feeling the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders, but also a new light in her heart. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in centuries, she felt ready to face it, not as a tyrant, but as a mother, a leader, and a protector. And as the stars shimmered outside, Zira knew that the choice she had made to embrace this new life, to trust Elias and to lead with hope, would set the foundation for a galaxy forever changed. The galaxy was on edge. News of Empress Zira's pregnancy and her new leadership approach had shaken the Korra Dominion to its core. Some worlds saw it as hope, while others saw weakness. Rebel factions, sensing an opportunity, began mobilizing. Fleets, determined to overthrow the Empress before she could consolidate her power. Aboard the Dominion's Fist, Zira stood in the command center, watching the tactical displays flicker with the movement of enemy ships. Elias Ward was at her side, calm and focused as ever. His human strategies had already helped her repel smaller attacks, but now the real test was approaching. The rebel fleet had combined forces and was moving fast toward the capital worlds. You cannot fight them all at once, Elias said, pointing to the displays. We must divide their forces, isolate them, and minimize casualties. If we fight as they expect, they will exploit our aggression. Zira nodded. Then we fight smart, not like tyrants. We fight to protect, not destroy. The first wave of rebel ships entered the outer systems. Zira's fleet met them head-on, but unlike past battles where she would have relied on fear to command obedience, she trusted her commanders and her soldiers' instincts. She communicated strategy clearly, allowed them to make decisions, and coordinated with Elias to anticipate the enemy's moves. The battle was intense. Ships danced through asteroid fields, lasers streaked across space, and explosions lit the void. Yet, under Zira's leadership and Elias's guidance, the Dominion forces managed to outmaneuver the rebels. Several ships were captured instead of destroyed, and casualties were kept minimal. Zira watched it all from the observation deck, feeling a strange mix of pride and anxiety. She had never led like this before. The victories were satisfying, but she knew the real test was still ahead, convincing the galaxy that fear was no longer the foundation of her rule. The second wave of the rebel fleet approached, larger and more organized. They had anticipated the Dominion's strategies and were prepared for heavier resistance. Zira's advisors whispered of retreat, of striking preemptively to crush the rebels before they could unite. But Zira refused. No, she said firmly. We do not lead with fear. We defend, yes, but we do not destroy. If we become what they fear, we are no better than before. Elias nodded, admiration in his eyes. Then we lead with courage and precision. We make them see that change is stronger than fear. As the battle began, Zira and Elias coordinated their forces meticulously. Human tactics blended with Korra strategies, creating unpredictable maneuvers that kept the rebel fleets off balance. The Dominion ships moved with purpose, capturing enemy vessels instead of destroying them, disabling weapons systems, and saving crew members whenever possible. The rebels were frustrated. They expected the Empress to strike with overwhelming force, to crush them and set an example for the galaxy. Instead, they found themselves outmaneuvered, trapped, and yet still treated with mercy. Their fleets faltered, confusion spreading among their ranks. Zira spoke to her commanders over the comms, her voice calm but commanding. We fight to protect, not to dominate. Those who surrender will be spared. Those who fight will be stopped, not destroyed. Show them the difference between fear and strength. It was a difficult balance. Some commanders hesitated, unsure if mercy was the right approach in a galaxy where ruthlessness had always been respected. But Elias's presence reassured them, his calm reasoning guiding their decisions. After hours of tense maneuvers, the rebels were forced to retreat. Their leaders were captured alive, and their fleets were scattered. The victory was decisive, but humane. A demonstration of a new type of power, one that did not rely on fear or tyranny. Zira allowed herself a moment of relief. She turned to Elias, who was already analyzing the reports of the battle. "We did it," she said softly. Elias looked up, smiling faintly. "We did it together, and we have shown them a different way to lead. The Dominion is stronger now, because it is guided by purpose, not fear." For the first time in centuries, Zira felt a sense of peace. She was still the Empress, still responsible for an empire spanning thousands of worlds, but she felt that the galaxy could be guided with justice, courage, and compassion. Yet Zira knew the struggle was not over. Rebel factions would regroup, and distant worlds still doubted her leadership. But she also knew that the foundation had been laid for change. The child she carried, the presence of Elias by her side, and her new approach to leadership would alter the destiny of the Dominion. In the quiet moments after the battle, Zira and Elias walked the observation deck together. The stars glimmered around them, distant and serene, as if reflecting the calm Zira felt inside. "You have changed everything," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Not just me, but the Empire." "You only let me help," Elias replied softly. "The courage, the strength, it was always yours. I just reminded you what you could do." Zira smiled faintly, feeling a warmth she had never known. For centuries, she had ruled alone, isolated by power and fear. Now she was not alone. She had an ally, a partner, and soon a child who would symbolize a new era. The galaxy was still dangerous, and the road ahead uncertain. But for the first time, Zira felt hope, a rare, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the Dominion could become something better than she had ever imagined. And as the stars stretched endlessly before them, Zira knew that she and Elias would face the future together. They would protect their people, defend the unborn child, and show the galaxy that true power was not built on fear, but on courage, compassion, and the willingness to change. The struggle for peace was far from over. But Zira had taken the first step, and for the first time, she believed that peace could last. The rebel fleets had not given up. Despite the setbacks, they had gathered their forces and launched a full-scale assault on the Dominion's capital worlds. The galaxy watched closely, wondering if Empress Zira, the tyrant who had ruled for centuries, could survive this challenge, especially now with her unborn child. Aboard the Dominion's Fist, Zira stood at the observation deck, her golden eyes fixed on the incoming enemy formations. Beside her, Elias Ward remained calm, analyzing the movements and projecting strategies onto the floating display. "They have combined their fleets," Elias said softly. "They expect us to panic or strike recklessly. But we won't. We fight. Smart, not fearfully." Zira nodded. "We fight to protect, not destroy. Let them see that the Dominion has changed." The first wave of the enemy approached the capital world, massive ships cutting through space like shadows. Zira's fleet met them with precision. Unlike the old days of tyranny and fear, Zira allowed her commanders freedom to act, trusting their judgment. She coordinated strikes carefully, capturing enemy vessels instead of destroying them, using tactics Elias had suggested. The enemy was confused. They expected overwhelming force, but instead, they faced resistance that was both decisive and controlled. The Dominion fleet moved as one, their movement swift, deliberate, and merciful. Ships disabled their opponents, lowered shields to allow surrender, and captured soldiers alive. Zira watched the battle unfold, her heart racing with a mix of fear and determination. She felt the life growing inside her, and it strengthened her resolve. She could not fail, not for the Dominion, not for Elias, and not for the child. Hours passed. The battle stretched across star systems, but slowly the rebel fleets began to falter. Their leaders were captured or forced to retreat. The Dominion, under Zira and Elias's combined leadership, held firm. Casualties were minimal, and the majority of enemy ships were taken as prisoners. When the battle finally ended, Zira and Elias stood together on the observation deck, watching the retreating fleets. Silence hung in the air, broken only by the hum of the ship. "We did it," Zira said, softly, her voice filled with relief. Elias looked at her, smiling. "No, we did not just win the battle. We have changed the way the galaxy will see the Dominion. They will remember that strength does not need fear, and power does not need cruelty." Zira's golden eyes softened, and for the first time in centuries, she felt something she had never known. Peace. She was still the Empress, still responsible for countless worlds, but she no longer carried the weight of ruling through fear alone. The next days were spent restoring order. Rebel factions were disbanded, leaders brought before tribunals, and systems given a choice to join the new Dominion willingly or face isolation. Zira's approach of justice, mercy, and courage surprised many, but it earned respect. Slowly, the galaxy began to believe that a new era was possible. One quiet evening, Zira walked with Elias in the ship's garden. The plants glowed softly, under artificial sunlight, and the air smelled faintly of flowers from countless worlds. She paused, placing a hand on her belly, feeling the life growing within. "This child," she said quietly. "It will be the first of a new era, won't it?" Elias smiled and took her hand. "Yes, it will be the symbol of hope and of change. You have already shown that peace is possible, Zira. The child will inherit a galaxy ready for something better." Zira looked at him, gratitude and affection shining in her eyes. "I never imagined it could be like this. I ruled for centuries through fear, and now I feel hope. For the first time in my life." Elias squeezed her hand. "You earned it. You changed not just the Dominion but yourself, and that is stronger than any weapon." Days later, on the capital world, a quiet celebration began. Citizens came together to honor the Empress's courage and the new direction of the Dominion. Flags waved, ships flew overhead in formation, and for the first time, people felt safe under her leadership, not afraid, but inspired. Zira watched from the palace balcony, holding Elias close. She thought of the battles, the challenges, and the fear she had once relied on to rule. All of it had led to this moment, a moment of peace, hope, and unity. Then, finally, the day arrived. The child was born aboard the Dominion's Fist, in the safety of the ship that had carried them through war and uncertainty. The nurses and medical staff, a mixture of human and Cora specialists, worked with careful precision, and when the child cried for the first time, a wave of emotion washed over Zira and Elias. "This is our future," Elias whispered, holding the newborn gently. "The galaxy will see that even the strongest empires can change, and that courage can be kinder than fear." Zira smiled, tears glistening in her golden eyes. "And we will protect it," she said. Together, the child was human Cora, a symbol of unity and hope for the galaxy. As Zira held the baby, she felt a peace that she had never known. She had conquered worlds, yes, but now she had built something far greater, a legacy of compassion, courage, and a future where the galaxy could thrive without fear. Elias watched her, his expression full of pride and quiet happiness. "The galaxy will remember this day," he said softly. "Not for the battles, but for the choice to be better." Zyra looked out at the stars, feeling their steady light reflect the hope in her heart. She had ruled for centuries through power and fear, but now she had learned a greater strength, and with her child in her arms, she knew that the galaxy would never be the same again. The Dominion had survived, and more than survived, it had changed. And for Empress Zyra, for Elias, and for their child, the future was finally at peace.